I asked my spouse to join me in cutting the cake on our third wedding anniversary. Raising the cake, he flung it in my direction. Beside him, his secretary was giggling. After announcing his new marriage to his secretary, he furiously flung divorce papers at me. My mind was blown. "You cannot do this," I shouted. He then removed me from the gathering. I resolved to get even. When he awoke the following day, I had prepared a huge, unexpected surprise. This is the account of my life, which I once believed to have been ideal. My name is Caroline Carter. Alan was a prosperous businessman in his 40s, and I was a contented wife in my mid-30s. We were residents of Dallas, Texas, where the sky appeared boundless and the sun regularly shone brightly. While Alan ran a prosperous import-export company, I was content with my position as an office clerk. I was sure we were in love after 3 years of marriage. Love, I had always thought, could overcome any obstacle. However, that night, the tide turned. I had planned a small, home-based celebration in honor of our third wedding anniversary. After ordering a cake, I delicately set it on the table and adorned the dining room with candles and flowers. I recognized Alan's favorite dish, roasted chicken, as soon as its perfume wafted through the room. As I eagerly awaited his return from work, I was overcome with joy. My pulse was pounding with excitement. Our evening was meant to be extra memorable. I recognized Alan's car rolling into the driveway as the clock struck 6. With a wide grin on my face, I'd hurry to the door, prepared to welcome him. My surprise was palpable as soon as I opened the door. His secretary, Tara, stood beside him. Tara was a younger woman who exuded an aura of confidence and had an easy chuckle. When I looked at them together, a knot formed in my stomach. "Happy anniversary, babes." Despite his typically warm voice, Alan's brightness was missing as he exclaimed. I mustered up an apology and a forced grin as I looked across at Tara, who appeared to be savoring the moment to the fullest. "Ah, thanks, Alan," I managed to say. Even more, my heart sunk. For what reason was she present? Our day was very unique. "Isn't this place beautiful?" "Look around," Tara remarked. "You really outdid yourself, Dorothy." As I started to say thanks, my words stumbled. Their shared laughter filled the air, making the place seem stuffy. I proposed, "Come on, let's cut the cake," in an effort to redirect the conversation to the reason for the celebration. I was so anxious that my unease would not come across, even though my voice quivered a little bit while I spoke. Alan smirked as he looked at Tara and shrugged. "Sure, let's get it over with." Enthralled, I guided them to the dining area. As I stood there, I could almost feel the audience's anticipation building, as if I were a character in a play. "Alan, come on, it's time to cut the cake," I exclaimed as I positioned myself in front of the cake. However, Alan's expression changed, and he wasn't the enthusiastic spouse I had anticipated. As he approached me, his expression turned irritated and his pupils constricted. In his haste to get the knife, he sliced through the cake layers rather of joyfully slicing them. He yelled out, "This is stupid," with a look of pure rage on his face. I was taken aback, and I stood there frozen. "What's wrong?" My voice was barely audible as I whispered the question. Alan, much to my surprise, picked up the whole cake in one swift motion and threw it directly at my face. My heart, my clothes, and my hair were all caked up. As the sugary icing cascaded down my cheeks, I remained motionless in my amazement. "Alan, what are you doing?" Our visitors gasped and retreated as I sobbed in embarrassment. I could still hear Tara's harsh laugh ringing in my head. "Your influence on me has diminished. Please leave my life." His voice trailed off into an indecipherable rant as he yelled. The impact of his words hit me so hard that I could feel my breath escaping. "What are you talking about?" I said, my voice quivering. "We can talk about this." Yet he had had enough of listening. "I have proposed to Tara. You're simply getting in the way of her being everything that I need." Everything around me became hazy. Our loved ones' shocked expressions on their faces were audible as they murmured something to one another. Standing there with cake oozing from my chin made me want to scream and cry and do anything but stand there. You can't be serious. My mind raced with incredulity as I stutter-talked. The divorce papers were tossed to the table by Alan. A harsh and conclusive sound escaped. Here it is, Dorothy. I've had enough. With a possessive gesture, he turned to Tara and embraced her by the shoulder. She's my new business partner and my future wife. Suffocating me were the words that lingered in the air. My heart broke into a million fragments. How dare you? With tears falling from my eyes, I yelled. This is too much for you. Together, we created a life. Not anymore, Alan declared icy as he turned away from me. A combination of humiliation and fury coursed through my body as I observed his departure, abandoning me to stand alone. Even more painful than the shame was Tara's laughing. I felt every bit of the agony he had just caused as I staggered out of the room, unable to think clearly. Everything seemed strange, as if I were in a nightmare from which I would never awaken. I went outside and immediately started gasping for breath in the brisk evening air. Help was required. None of us could handle this. I reached for my phone and dialed my best friend Sophie's number without giving it any thought. Dorothy, what's wrong? Just as soon as she got on the phone, her voice betrayed her genuine concern. I am dependent on you. Should I invite you over? My voice quivered as I struggled to speak. After she said, I'm on my way, I leaned against the wall to gather my thoughts and hung up the phone. The idea that my entire world may collapse in a moment was completely foreign to me. My heart and world were broken by Alan and Tara. I had to figure out how to get back in charge. My resolve to not let this betrayal to shape who I am became clear as I awaited Sophie's arrival. No matter how difficult it became, I would always find a way to assert my independence and reclaim my life. I was unprepared for what the night held in store, but I was hell-bent on facing it head-on. As soon as Sophie walked in, she hurried over to be by my side, and I felt her embrace. What took place? The cake was sprawled all on you. What was Alan up to? The enormity of the situation finally got to me, and I sobbed. He then presented me with the divorce papers and flung the cake at me. He has decided to leave me for Tara. Sophie's mouth dropped open in disbelief. It's devastating. Much improved treatment is due to you, Dorothy. I know, I muttered as I wiped away my tears with the back of my palm. However, I must take action. I must ascertain the truth of the matter. Sophie turned solemn as she stared at me. What do you mean? Tara's true intentions will be revealed to me. Doing nothing will allow them to get away with it. The truth must be revealed to me. I felt a glimmer of optimism with Sophie by my side. After Alan took my power away, I was hell-bent on reclaiming it by exposing the dark secrets of my life. I knew the road ahead would be tough, but I was prepared to do whatever it took to secure my future. Emotions flew through the air in the days that followed. It was after that terrible night that Sophie and I moved in together. I really needed the comforting atmosphere of her tiny but charming flat, which was brimming with vivid colors and a sense of community. I couldn't sit idly by and let Alan to get away with his treachery. The shock had barely worn off yet. I wanted to know who Tara was and what she was up to, and I needed answers. Over coffee one morning, Sophie sat with me, her face grave. Dorothy, exercise caution. Your marriage is no longer the sole focus here. Something fishy seems to be going on with Tara. The bitterness of the coffee reflected the bitterness in my emotions as I stared into my cup, nodding. I've been considering it too. I can't believe Alan would abandon me for her like that. Something is seriously wrong with them, and I need to know why. Sophie stooped down. Do you think it would be a good idea to hire a private investigator? Somebody who can investigate Alan's financial operations and Tara's private life. Although the idea had occurred to me, I was hesitant to act on it. Do you think it would really help? I think so. She was emphatic in her statement that you should know the truth and that evidence should be gathered if they are engaging in unlawful activities. After a hard day of planning my future, I sat down with my laptop that night and looked into Dallas private investigators. Tom Reynolds, who was known for getting to the bottom of things and had good evaluations, was the one I found. It seemed like destiny when I contacted him to arrange a meeting for the following day. Feeling both anxious and resolved, I made my way to Tom's office. He smiled warmly at me and motioned for me to take a seat. "So, Dorothy, what brings you here?" he inquired, maintaining an air of professionalism while still making Caroline feel welcome. I inhaled deeply. Alan, my husband, just dumped me for Tara, his secretary. Help me figure out what she might be up to. I have a hunch she's up to no good. I told Tom everything that had happened before my awful anniversary, and he listened carefully. When I went over what happened that night with Tara and Alan's abrupt hostility, his brow furrowed. "There seems to be more going on here than simply a broken marriage," he remarked with some consideration. "I am here to assist you, but I require your complete collaboration. It would be helpful if you could share any details." I had a renewed sense of direction, so I nodded. "I need to know what their connection is and if Alan's business is involved in anything illegal." "Just give it to me," Tom remarked. "I will begin by investigating Tara's history and any ties she could have to Alan's company. Additionally, I will investigate his business for any signs of suspicious behavior." This Tom told me. I did my best to stay busy and concentrated on my work as the days went by. However, I found that Alan and Tara's thoughts entered my consciousness more frequently than I preferred. Both the betrayal and the growing curiosity about what Tom might find were too much to bear. Tom phoned me to give me the news after I had been waiting anxiously for a week. His voice was grave as he declared, "Dorothy, I have some information you need to hear." "Is it about Tara?" My pulse pounding, I inquired. "Yes, but it's more than just her." Tom hesitated. "Tara is more than just Alan's secretary. She's been hiding her involvement in drug dealing behind his import-export company." A trickle of blood ran down my cheeks. "What do you mean?" "It has come to light that she has been involved in the illegal drug trade, and I have discovered proof of her ties to well-known traffickers," Tom added. "Alan appears to be involved, hiding behind the company to cover up her wrongdoing." "Are you serious?" In an effort to take it all in, I let out a gasp. He could go to prison for this. "Yes, he could," Tom said. "But that's not all. There are big sums of money that don't add up to real business dealings that I uncovered. Alan might be stealing money to fund these activities." The stunning fact sent my thoughts racing. "What do we do now?" While thinking about what to say next, Tom halted. "More proof is required. We may be able to get the police involved if we can establish a strong case against them. Nevertheless, a lot of preparation and work will be required." A new sense of resolve washed over me. I am prepared. I desire to witness their acquittal. This won't go unpunished. Sensing my determination, Tom grinned. "Very well, I will immediately begin working on this. We will find out what happened, and I will keep you informed the whole time." I turned to Sophie, who had been waiting for news with bated breath, as I hung up the phone. Despite my excitement and worry, I managed to get out the words, "You won't believe what I just found out." This caused my voice to quiver. "Tell me," she pleaded, bending forward. "Tara is more than simply a secretary. Alan might be involved as well, and she's involved in drug dealing," I said, my heart pounding. Sophie's mind became blank. "Dorothy, this is a major matter. Proceed with caution." I took a big breath and responded, "I know." Yet at this point, I will not budge. I must be informed of all the facts. I was prepared to delve further into Alan and Tara's illicit activities with the backing of my friend and Tom's assistance. A newfound sense of strength was taking root inside me. Betrayal was no longer the only issue. It was all about getting my life back and getting justice. No matter how risky it got, I was going to see it through to the finish. The probe into Alan and Tara's dubious dealings became more intense once Tom joined my cause. New evidence surfaced daily, and with each finding, my determination grew stronger. No longer was I going to sit on the sidelines and watch as her world fell apart. I was starting to take an active role in my life's narrative. In the middle of a bustling cafe, where the aroma of coffee wafted through the air, I met up with Tom one afternoon. I could see he was taking things seriously as I found a seat. As he leaned in closer, he spoke. "Dorothy, I have some updates for you." "Is it about Alan and Tara?" My pulse pounding, I inquired. "Yes," was his response. "I've been keeping tabs on their whereabouts and bank accounts. They seem to have been meeting with some really hazardous individuals." "Dangerous people?" With a nod in my gut, I echoed. "What do you mean?" Tom inhaled deeply. "I found out that Tara is associated with a Dallas-based drug ring. Alan may be more than a bystander. He may play a significant role in their operations. At the same time as these gatherings, I have proof that he has been withdrawing large sums of money." A wave of terror engulfed me. So, what am I to make of this? If they have ties to a drug ring, they might take action if they discover I'm looking into them. That could happen, Tom conceded. However, we must move with caution. If we can get the authorities to accept the information I have, it might lead to their arrest. It's valuable. We simply require additional proof to ensure its absolute certainty. I nodded, my shoulders weighed down by the enormity of the situation. "Yes, I do. Whatever it takes, I'm prepared to do." The plan was laid forth by Tom. I intend to attend their upcoming meeting as a spy. It could provide us with the leverage we need if we can catch them red-handed or overhear something that implicates them. Every week after that, we put our strategy into action. As we waited outside a plain warehouse for Alan and Tara to meet, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation coursed through me. I kept telling myself that I was fighting for justice and my own future. I could feel my heart racing and my adrenaline levels dropping as the sun went down and the shadows lengthened. We waited in Tom's car in silence, the eerie light of the streetlights forming a shadow. Alan arrived in his stylish black sedan after an anxious hour, and Tara climbed into the passenger seat shortly after. Upon realizing this was it, my heart began to rush. "Stay quiet and can keep your phone ready to record," Tom whispered as he directed. With a racing heart, I gave the signal as Alan's vehicle pulled up to the warehouse. I could tell they were both nervous just by looking at their body language when they stepped out. Tara appeared to be listening carefully, her look grave while Alan was making animated gestures. Tom and I moved closer, listening for a word or two they might say. Even though it was hard to make out, the phrases discretion, shipment, and payment made my stomach turn. Out of nowhere, a big vehicle rolled up, and out sprang a number of soldiers. Their intimidating appearance sent shivers down my spine. Tom was already filming, so I shot him a frightened look. "We must draw nearer," he said with a sense of urgency. My pulse was pounding as we cautiously advanced. I had gone too far to turn around now, even though I was aware that I was crossing a boundary. I could feel the tension between the men and Alan even though they spoke in low tones. I was scared about what might happen next because the stakes were so high. "Check that everything is prepared for the next shipment," Alan stated, his voice composed although slightly anxious. My breath caught in my throat when one of the men turned at that very moment. That was a familiar face. It had belonged to a notorious criminal with ties to the gang. With the knowledge that this was the evidence we sorely required, I recorded with trembling hands. Tara produced a briefcase, which she opened to show stacks of cash, and I watched as the meeting progressed. Took my breath away. We finally have proof of their illegal actions. "This is it," I muttered to Tom. "We must file a formal complaint." A rumbling sound cut us off before I could finish speaking. From behind the warehouse, the crash resounded. Alan abruptly pivoted, his face changing to one of apprehension, as the men leaped. "What on earth was that?" he growled. We dove behind a passing car, my pulse racing as panic washed over me and Tom. There was no mistaking that chaos was going to ensue. A mix of fear and a newfound resolve washed over me. Despite the dangers, I had transformed from a betrayed wife into a strong woman determined to reclaim her life. Whispering, "Stay close," Tom kept his eyes darting around. "We need to be careful." I had no idea the road to justice would be so treacherous as we watched the events develop. The stakes were at an all-time high, and I was hell-bent on seeing this through to the very finish. As we drew near the vehicle, I could feel my heart racing. The tense atmosphere was disrupted by the crash that had stunned everyone just a moment before. Tom and I exchanged anxious looks as we realized this might be our sole opportunity to obtain concrete proof of Alan and Tara's complicity in unlawful endeavors. Turning to Tara, Alan's worried expression contorted his face. "Stay here, I'll investigate," he responded, his voice betraying his underlying stress. He left Tara and the men on edge as he strode towards the sound's origin. As one of the men cautiously glanced around, he muttered, "Do you think it was the police? Taking any chances is not an option. Yet I am not sure." "The game is over if we're caught," Alan said, his voice quiet but determined. Perched on his phone, Tom drew nearer, recording each word. Realizing we were about to discover everything sent a rush of exhilaration through my body. I had been eagerly anticipating this moment. While Alan ventured deeper into the shadows, Tara paced restlessly, nervously chewing her nails. The air was thick with tension as the other men whispered nervously to one another. I looked across to Tom, and he gave me a helpful nod, so I knew I should keep recording. At that very moment, the warehouse door swung open, and a squad of cops rushed out, yelling orders. "Cool down, everyone. Raise your hands," they demanded forcefully. The men scurried to comply, and panic ensued. As Tara's expression turned white, I could tell that she was starting to grasp the gravity of the situation. Officers quickly encircled Alan as he hurried back to the group. His voice betrayed his uncertainty and rage as he yelled out, "What the hell is going on?" As one cop advanced with handcuffs prepared, the other remarked, "Sir, you are under arrest for drug trafficking and conspiracy." When I realized that our hard work had been worthwhile, a sigh of relief rolled over me. Tom and I looked at each other with glee. The terror was about to stop. Alan looked at me with angry fury in his eyes as he was handcuffed. "This is entirely on you, Dorothy. You had to stick your nose where it didn't belong," he yelled, his voice resonating through the darkness. I refused to budge and held firm. "Alan, you have already decided. Instead of committing to our marriage, you opted for Tara and a life of crime. No one can hold it against me that I see clarity." With the officers escorting her away, Tara's once bravado fell apart, and she began to cry. "Alan, what's our plan? You said you would," she begged. "Shut up." In a fit of rage, Alan yelled out at her. I could perceive the fissures in his exterior. Corruption and falsehoods were destroying the life I once knew for the man I loved. I finally felt like the mystery was becoming solved when the cops started collecting evidence. We gave them the recordings that Tom and I had made, which described all that we had seen. For Alan's betrayal wasn't the only issue. Retribution for all those he had wronged was paramount. My spirit was heavy, but my resolve unwavering when I sat in the courtroom days later. The weight of their sins was made naked before the judge as Alan and Tara faced him. At last, the truth was emerging from the mountain of evidence. The ramifications of their numerous charges, which included drug trafficking and embezzlement, were harsh. I felt a sense of relief and empowerment when the gavel struck, sentencing them to 10 years in prison. The right thing had happened. Now that I was once again the boss of my own life, I thought I could make a fresh start. I started over with my life when Alan and Tara were in prison. Through it all, Sophie was there for me, and I was able to rediscover joy. Someone who had always been there for me, Mark, even got back in touch with me. Our connection deepened as we learned to appreciate and comprehend one another. I learned that I am stronger than I gave myself credit for thanks to this ordeal. No amount of betrayal could ever ruin my life or make me who I am. I had triumphed against adversity. I felt hopeful about the future for the first time in a long time, even if the road ahead was still uncertain. I was prepared to welcome it with open arms, no longer content to merely survive, but to thrive, abounding in fresh starts and boundless opportunities.